Hey, everybody. We are back again with Chris and Chris from Quantum Rhino. And we want to talk a little bit about meetings because we've been working on a little side project around this because it is something, at the Process Fixer, we're going in and we're analyzing and mining the systems and the process of the company, trying to find inefficiencies. And I've got a little story. I'll do a little bit of a setup here for us. Many years ago, I was working with one of the largest companies in the world, a big oil company that everybody here knows who they are. And if you look in your 401k and you figure out what everybody's invested in, these are the guys. The large oil company, and I was doing some consulting work for them. And the first meeting I'd ever booked for them, I had to fly my team out there, and it was a meeting with the president of the company. And this is like a guy you read about in the Wall Street Journal. Sure. So it's like, this is a pretty big meeting. And they told us we had 60 minutes, and we showed up, and we were taken through a process that to this day, I still remember it in really minute detail because it was so powerful. We got to the front and they said, yes, welcome. We're going to have somebody take you to the room. And it was an assistant that took us to the room. She showed us how to get everything set up. She made sure we had drinks. Anybody use a bathroom, anything, and we were like, well, the meeting starts in 10 minutes. And she's like, the meeting starts when everything is ready. So we get everything ready. And then she said, pick up the phone when you have your presentation and your slides and everything's done, pick up the phone and I will answer and I will go retrieve the team. So I was ready and I picked up the phone and she said, great, I'll go retrieve the team. So she comes back a few minutes later with another assistant and 2 executives. Now this meeting was supposed to be the president and 3 C-level people. It was a big meeting. Only 2 of them showed up and the president wasn't there. She immediately announced and she said, I'm very sorry, but it does look like the president has been overbooked. I'm going to sit in here in his stead and I'll take very good notes. And if just by happenstance he becomes available, we'll bring him into the meeting. Okay, great. I fire into my presentation. I'm doing my thing. Right at the 20-minute mark, the phone rings in the room. And it was this is like oak cabinets kind of old, place, right? This is like the law firm. So the assistant goes over and she picks up this old phone and she goes, oh, that's wonderful, wonderful news. I will let everybody know that he will be coming down. And she hangs up the phone and she says, I'm going to retrieve the president. So she said, continue on with your presentation and I'll bring him down in a few minutes. So she leaves and she goes, and about 5 minutes later, she brings him back in and he walks in and he immediately knows my name, knows all of my people's name. And he summarizes the whole thing in about 15, 30 seconds. He says, I hear you're here today to talk about this. And this is what you've talked about in the history of your company and all these things. He's like, let's cut to the chase. Show me what you're here to present to me and show me what my competitors have said about this so far. So we go into about 8 minutes and he stops and says, I've got all the information I need. My team will be making a decision and points to one of the folks and they say in about 2 weeks. He says, that's great. Thank you all for being here. He stands up, shakes everybody's hand, tells a little funny story about something and is sort of personal for a few minutes. Assistant grabs his arm and wheels him out of the room. Great meeting. I got an engagement with this company and we got engaged to do some work with them. And I became friends with one of the executives. And one night we were out having a couple of beers and he said, do you know that was a whole system that you went through? That wasn't random. And I'm like, what are you saying? He said, yeah. He goes, here's how it works. We never bring a senior level executive into a vendor meeting until the meeting has been vetted. And he's like, so we'll send a couple executives in there with an assistant. The assistant's keeping notes. When that phone rings, it isn't to say that he's coming down. It's for the assistant to let the president's office know if he should come down or if this is a bullshit meeting.
Right.
So she was like, her saying, oh, that's wonderful news. Nobody was saying anything on the other line. She was alerting them that it's good to have him in this meeting. Then she went to his office, retrieved him, and he's like, the entire walk down the hallway, down the elevators and everything, she's going through it. She's like, here's exactly what's going on. Here's the people. Here's their personalities. Here's little anecdotes from them. And he even said, if he stops to go in the bathroom, the assistant's going to the bathroom. He goes into the stall and they're on the other side of the wall yelling things out because it's very efficient with time. So he's like, when he comes into that room, he's already been in the meeting because his advocate's been in the meeting and she's clarified everything and she's got all the points. And he's like, so we'll regularly book him to 4 or 5 meetings in an hour because we can move him in and out of meetings or cancel them. And he's like, so you thought you were the only one there to meet with him at that time. If you were to talk to anybody else in the lobby, they're all going, I'm also meeting with so-and-so at the exact same time as you are. It's like, that's how we're running this business.
They've got 4 lobbies with 4 different meeting rooms.
But I thought, damn, Like that's efficient. But when you're a multi-billion-dollar company and the time of that executive is worth, what could it be worth if you went and met with a senator or a congressman or the president? That time could be worth millions or billions of dollars.
Sure.
So wasting a minute is considered so taboo in those organizations. I saw this happen with the biggest retailer out there. I did some work for them years ago. Every manager knew cost of labor per second for their department. And they managed their world based upon, well, it only takes an extra 100 feet for the person to walk over. And they were like, nah, that's millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So that brings us to this. And I wanted to set this up with that conversation because it's been so pivotal in my whole life of me thinking about time like that I just happened to sort of flippantly mention to Chris, not that's Chris, this Chris. And I said, yeah, we're starting to track this for customers and we audit these calendars and we tend to find tens of thousands of hours in meetings that aren't necessary. And the problem is, until you quantify that problem, let's be honest, you're a CEO, I'm a CEO, you're a CTO.
Different letter. Yeah.
Right? But we think in numbers.
Yeah.
We think in Excel spreadsheets. We want to see the calculation. And it's one thing to go, well, we're wasting time in meetings. And you go, yeah, whatever. It's another thing when I go, hey, Chris, here's 60,000 hours, $5 million you spent in these meetings.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you go, oh, okay, no more 60 minutes.
Right.
Everybody does it in 8 minutes or less. And so we've started to build a tool around that. And you had already really started down that path. And now we're just helping apply some of our IP to it. What is it called again?
It's Worth Meeting.
Worth Meeting, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's an Outlook plugin.
It is.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what it is right now, and then we can talk a little bit more about how we're developing it out.
We built it for our internal use, right? Because we have consultants and different people, project managers on meetings, and it's a lot of meetings. So you want to quantify that cost. It's the difference between I feel like we have a lot of meetings or I know meetings are costing us, like you said, this amount of money.
Dollar figure to it.
Yeah. So we started with that messaging last year at our annual meeting. And just telling them, this is what it costs. This is what it costs us. Be mindful, that kind of thing. And then we got to thinking, because we're all software engineers, we could build a thing. So
how do you automate it?
Exactly. Yeah. We don't want people with a calculator calculating every meeting, right? So we built a proof of concept. It's where it is today. We use it internally for all of our meetings. And it calculates the internal cost of your meeting. What is it? Is it worth meeting? Right. So
it's pretty self-explanatory.
That's where we are.
Yeah, I mean,
right? That's the question you're answering.
Are you seeing any benefit from it just yet? Like I know.
Just one example is the time of meeting. So Outlook by default, you get a half an hour or an hour, so you got an hour meeting on there. So we're looking internally at like cutting that hour meeting down to 40 minutes. What is a 30-minute meeting go down to 20 minutes? And every meeting that we have with the developers are the key staff, and they're very expensive talent. So we want to make sure we control that as much as possible.
It makes so much sense. And I think you are right. There's simple things you can do. We just recently we're doing an analysis for a company, and we found if they could take 7 minutes off every one of their meetings, it was like hiring 10 new full-time employees. Just if they could just shut 7 minutes off every meeting, that might be possible. It might not. But I will tell you, Parkinson's law says that work always expands to fit the time allotted.
I didn't know what it was called.
Yeah,
I knew the concept.
Law. Yeah.
There you go.
He had two really good ones. That was one, and the other one's called bike shedding. So we're going to get off on a little tangent here because of Parkinson's. I love him from the 50s. He only ever wrote two little books that were like these tiny little. They look like religious tracts, which is sort of a good way to do it if you're just trying to make a point. It's like, let me share the religion of time management with you. But his other one was called bike shedding. It was really interesting. He went and observed I think it was a nuclear power plant that was being built in Europe. And they just couldn't figure out why there were all these delays and bureaucracy and everybody had all these excuses. And he went and he sat through a number of the meetings, and he found that they spent about 80% of their time trying to determine how many people would ride bikes to work and how many bike stalls they needed to put out front for people. And what the point was is that when left to their own devices without an agenda, you will focus on the most trivial, meaningless shit because you feel like you have control over it. The hard stuff, you will punt as long and as far away from yourself as you can. I mean, don't we all do this? When Sink says, I need it Friday at 5:00, About 4:45, you're like, I better start writing some code on this.
It's done at 5, though. It's done at 5.
It's done at 5. And there's a method to that, right? But yes, really understanding that time will expand to fit, work will expand to fit the time allotted for it. When you got to cut to the chase, you got to cut to the chase. And there is time. Talked about this on an earlier call or on an earlier podcast, and I think it really affects even the things that we're talking about. We've recently came up with some content that says there's only 4 types of meetings in organizations, and we've now analyzed probably 1 million meetings, hundreds of thousands at least, and we found some very interesting trends. There's really only 4 purposes to meet. There is a decision meeting. We're making a decision. There's an education meeting. We're being educated. We're learning something new. There is a design build meeting. That is you bringing your code, I bringing my user interface, you bringing the idea. We all get together and we go, how do our pieces fit together? And we work those things out. Then there's a 4th category called the inform meeting. And the interesting trend that you find in it is this. When you look through these big CSV files of Outlook things, you put the words catching up in there and you start to find tens of thousands of these meetings where this word catching up is in there. And it dawned on me one evening that if I'm deciding, if I'm designing, if I'm building and creating, I'm moving the organization forward.
Yeah.
If I am catching you up, by nature, that means you have fallen behind and I have to stop to catch you up. So is that a progress meeting? Absolutely not. It's the worst kind of meeting possible. So now we've started to say to our clients, if you've got it in that first 3 categories, do it. Maybe add an extra 10 minutes each one of those, because that's good shit.
Yeah.
Like that's going to make you money. These other meetings, we need to make war against them. We need to put the face paint on and sharpen the axe and say, we're going to get out there and we're just going to hack these things away. And that's the kind of meeting that's really dangerous, because everybody's trying to get on the same page, which is odd, because we have Slack and we have Teams and we have all of these Trello and all of these tools that you would think would be catching us up as we were going, but for some reason we still have to have a freaking meeting.
Oh yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense. So those are the meetings that are really dangerous, I think, to most companies.
Yeah, and those, you're looking at what's already happened. So catching people up may mean changing what you've already done. You're not going forward, and you might be going backwards.
You might be. And I so many times it happens. And listen, I think as an executive, this happens very frequently, where somebody works on a project for a while and then they bring it to you and you go, oh shit. This is not the direction. This is not so now we're abandoning work. Now we've got sunk cost again. And listen, the person who just did all that and stayed up all night to put that presentation together for me so that I felt like, that it was all their work is lost too. And this is the interesting thing about meetings, because there is this concept I call the work waste paradox that, I want to do high value stuff at work. The highest value thing I can do is sign new contracts with customers. Like there ain't nothing better than that, right? Will your hand ever get tired if you just had $1 billion?
No,
it'll never get tired. Like, magically, you will find the energy to do it.
We'll find the time.
Yeah, but it's the other stuff. It's that stuff that we go, should we have actually even done this? And even worse to that, the construction example I love to give is, I saw this happen years ago where somebody went to get some lumber and came back and they said, the 2x4x10s were on sale. And honestly, it was much easier to load them. They would have had to go in the back and get the 2x4x8s. We'd just hack the end off.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, no big deal. Only cost us a few cents more, until you realize we had to buy a saw. We got to do the labor to saw all that.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to get a wheelbarrow, pick up that. Now we got sawdust all over the job site. We got to clean the sawdust up. Oh, we go to the dumpster. Oh, the dumpster's full. Well, now we got to pay the tipping fee. Well, we might as well and then the accountant goes, well, we're dumping that dumpster way too frequent. We should get a bigger dumpster. And the next thing you know, because this guy was a little bit lazy and didn't want to wait 5 minutes, we just spent $100,000.
Yeah. Hopefully you don't cut it short.
Right.
Yeah. Short when it gets there, right?
And then you're right. You can't return them now. There's all sorts of things that happen in that. So it's like those type of activities happen, in that bottom level of the company. And let's be candid, as executives, we're not seeing it. We're not actively out looking at the work that's being done every day. You're not counting every 1 and 0 in the code, are you? You're not going at the end of the, you're not checking. It's not possible. So if there's waste in there, we're gonna have a hard time.
Yeah.
And if we don't route it out, it will expand to fit. I think this is just part of the challenges of being in business. And that's why I love the work that you are doing. And that's why even we've started to regularly get together and say, what are the problems we're seeing?
Yeah.
What are the problems you're seeing? How do we find some sort of tech bridge like this tool that we're going to work on together?
Yeah.
You guys have done a great first iteration of it. And we're sitting here going, what if we could calculate opportunity costs by looking at the average revenue per employee and tiering it based upon, is it a CEO or an intern?
Absolutely.
What if we could, I think one of the biggest things, what's the purpose of the meeting?
Mm-hmm.
Like code it to something, like it's a law firm.
Yep.
Code it to a job. Well, this is just to catch it. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So you don't need to have it.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So what are other places that you're seeing companies, you get a perspective in the role that you're in because you're interviewing many different companies. What other things are you seeing? Here I am as an entrepreneur sitting here going, tell me something else we can go build a piece of software. What are other things that you're seeing out there where companies are struggling?
Collecting data, processing data. Huge cost. McKinsey and Company, the management consulting firm, they did a study and concluded those collecting and processing data and predictable physical labor are 51% of labor, $2.7 trillion annually.
Wow.
So companies are getting data in disconnected systems. They have to figure out how to categorize data, all this stuff. And so if we can make that quicker, more connected with, whether it's custom integrations or choosing the right tool, that's a lot of, it all starts with data. So
it does. I've recently did a speech on this and I was challenged by somebody in the AI space. And he said, I want you to go look at your email and then I want you to look at your meetings and I want you to only count the ones that aren't giving somebody information, getting somebody information, obtaining a status, giving a status, or a communication about when can we meet. So he's like, take those out and count what work you actually do.
Yeah.
95% of all of my communication in email falls into those categories. Exactly to your point. The data's there, but for some reason I have to act as this mule.
you're processing it.
Yeah.
You're
I am
flagging it for spam.
It's like, wait a second. Technically, couldn't a monkey do that? Why am I as a CEO spending all my day trying to figure out how to connect these little pieces of things together? The data's there.
Yeah.
It's not that anybody has to go create it. It's just that going back to that inform. The information is here. The information is here. Somebody has to play the mule. And for some reason, we have tolerated it being us.
Mm-hmm.
Like, sorry, that's bullshit. Like we have to stop that. We got to figure out how to automate multiple data entry into multiple systems.
It's crazy.
Real-time data too is a big difference between batch-based systems. So you can integrate things, but you're always trying to chase this moving target when you're doing it in batch. So even though real-time seems like it's scary, do I really need it? Is the company going to be that much better off? But the problem is you're going to spend so much time chasing the right answer when you do things in batch that,
I like that you said that because we talked about this a couple times today. If I'm going to navigate from point A to point B, do I want a paragraph of written instructions or do I want a map?
Yeah.
I probably want a map because a map's going to tell me where I'm going. And listen, with GPS and with Waze and all these technologies out there, if I have those written instructions that I wrote down, well, my grandmother wrote these down and she gave them to me. This is how we get to her house. Okay, that's all well and good. But that doesn't mean that the roads are still the same.
Yeah.
Right? That doesn't mean that Waze hasn't reported an accident,
right,
or a police incident or a road closure or a detour. So we have to rely upon that real-time access to data. I would never drive from here to California without Waze. Yeah. Because there's been times where we're going through LA and I'm like, it's just better to pull over and sit here for 2 hours and just smack ourselves in the head than it is to drive into LA right now. Because we're going to spend 3 hours just sitting there smacking ourselves in the head. So let's just get out of the car. Let's go get a drink.
Yeah.
Let's take the dog for a walk and grab some sushi. And our destiny, we're still going to reach our destination at the same time. But that's what real-time data does.
Yeah,
and if
definitely.
you don't have that real-time access, then you are always going to be navigating in that void of a lack of information.
Exactly.
Or you're making decisions based on yesterday's numbers because the new numbers don't come in until midnight tonight or something. Right.
I think this is something that happens a lot in accounting and in boardrooms. I've sat in lots of boardrooms where we're making decisions on something. It's the end of the quarter, the 15th day after the end of the quarter, we get to financials. We meet 2 weeks later. We're sitting there having a discussion about events that occurred at the earliest 2 months ago, but likely 3 or 4 months ago. And we're trying to steer the decisions of the organization based upon data points that occurred before ChatGPT was even launched. Right? And we're sitting here going, how do we navigate through this thing? And I'm going, I don't know if we can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We're the train has careened so far down the tracks at this point, and nobody ever wants to back up. Right? And we never want to go backwards. We always want to go forward.
Right.
So now we got to cut this new trail to get to a point that we could have just got there if we'd had that real-time access. And this is a problem. And I mean, it's not just $100 million companies that have this problem. Yeah, I'm seeing it everywhere. It actually seems to be worse the bigger you get, the more siloed you become on your data.
Yeah, definitely.
Are you seeing how, I know a lot of talk about data lakes, right? Are you guys doing anything with data lakes and with that kind of work yet?
I don't know. Not really in that space. We haven't seen a need for that with the clients we're working with. I know.
But I mean, you're in that precursor before then, right? You're helping them get set up so that at some point you've got structured data and you're in 1 or 2 systems so that you can have access to those tools.
We're working with clients that we're trying to get their data warehouse to a point where, they can use it on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. It's real time. And then they can get to the data lake. It's one of the walk before you run type scenarios.
And again, it goes back to the trend is, I'm predicting it. We're 3 or 4 years away from a great dissolution of businesses because it just won't be able to do it.
Yeah.
Because everybody else will have gone through these steps and said, look, we went in the data warehouse. We cleaned out all the rats, all the cobwebs are gone, all the junk data. And listen, this is really hard for CEOs to hear, but there is data that you are storing right now that, I don't need your credit card receipts from 1986. From when you bought the Craftsman tools at Sears. Like, you haven't worn that shirt in like 15 years, man. You can throw that stuff away. There's so much of this. I've had it happen time and time. One of the stories I love to tell, and I know we've got a wrap here, but my wife calls it, and she gives a slide on this about this story. But I worked with a company years back that we were redoing their warehouse. And in the middle of the main thoroughfare of the warehouse, there were 3 pallets that sat there. And every time I went out to talk to employees or I was there working, I would always put my coffee on these pallets, these stacks of boxes. And one day when we were reorganizing the warehouse, I had noticed that we had to navigate around them. We had to back around them and moved around these things all the time. And I said, what are these? And the employees all started laughing. They said, you got to go talk to the CEO. I said, well, what are you talking about? To go talk to the CEO. So open up the damn box, right? So I opened them up. This was 2016. And they were 2013 wall calendars that we were going to give out to clients as with their holiday gift basket or whatever. So they're 3-year-old wall calendars.
Wow.
And I said, go get a forklift. Let's throw this shit away, right? They're like, we don't have the authority, the authorization. You're going to have to go talk to the CEO. Yeah. So I march in there thinking, this is the easiest suggestion I ever met.
Yeah.
He was like, well, could we do anything with them? And I'm like, bro, you've got 100,000 years before these dates are coming back around. I mean, I don't know what, let's cryogenically freeze it. Just throw the damn thing away. And this is really true in warehouses. Every time I walk a warehouse, as part of the end of the tour, I say, show me what's behind the curtain. And everybody goes, what do you mean? And I go, show me. Where's it at? Is it shipping containers in the parking lot? Is it behind some wall? Where's it at? And usually they go, oh yeah, it's back here. And then you open and you're like, it's all rotted and deteriorated. And they're like, but, and I'm like, guys, throw that away. Yeah. We have to do the same thing with data and information. We've got to be able to and process. I talked about it in one of the last episodes. Look, you should have a process capability goal for every one of your processes. Meaning that if I set a capability goal for a process and I say it does 100 widgets a day, at 101, it should break. Because if it doesn't, I over-engineered it.
Yeah.
And is over-engineering ever a good thing? Well, as an engineer, you're probably sitting there going, well, now wait a second.
It's costly. I agree with
you. It's very costly.
Right.
I just last night, I was with a CEO and he said, we build our process to do $1 billion in revenue a year. And I said, how much are you doing? He said, like 25 million.
Yeah.
I'm like, I said, man, you must have wasted a ton of cash. And he's like, how dare you? I'm like, think about it, man. He's like, shit.
And if you save that till you're doing $1 billion, now you got to redo it anyway.
Right.
It's not going to be relevant.
The world's going to change.
Yep.
And I think that's the great thing, the lesson that we learn here. So thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks
This
for
was
having us.
awesome. I feel like we got a lot of really great information here. And if you're a CEO that's struggling with this, right, you guys are the guys to call, or call us and we'll call them, because
Absolutely.
we can help you clean all that crap up on the process side and then help these guys figure out how to automate that piece.
Absolutely. It's a great team.
So quantumrhino.com. Thank you
That's
guys
right.
for being here. Yeah.
Thanks.
You ready? Let's go. Welcome to the Process Fixer. Help you see the bigger picture. Derrick Maines is the elixir, cutting waste away like scissor. Woo! Got a problem, he can solve it. He's an expert with the process, so for sure you'll see a profit. Bottom line profit. Analyze the work your people doing every day. Expose the inefficiencies getting in the way. Advise you how to automate, outsource, abbreviate, eliminate, innovate. Now there's more food up on your dinner plate.